This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I made a fully weighted checklist that you can go through to find out if your job is right for you. So the way this works is every time something applies to your job, then add or subtract how many points the item is valued, and then keep track of your score, and at the end I'll tell you what it means. Okay, so the first item is you don't dread getting up in the morning. So like before your job, you wake up and like you feel neutral, or like you don't have the existential dread in the morning when you're like, oh my god, I have to go to my job. So if that applies to you, then that's a +6. Okay, and then the second item is you actually enjoy the core tasks at your job, not just the idea of your job. So if that applies to you, then you get a +8. If you're constantly clock watching at your job, so like you clock in and then you're just watching the time all the time to see when you can clock off, if that applies to you, that's a -6. If you feel mentally stimulated at your job, that's a +7. If you regularly feel like you can't do anything on the weekends because you're too drained from work and you need to recover and you're like too wiped to see your friends or go outside or like do anything that you actually like, if that applies to you, that's a -10. You have at least one or two coworkers at your workplace that you feel like you can talk to honestly without performing to them, or like that you feel like aren't gonna rat on you if you have any like gripes or complaints about the workplace. If that applies to you, then that's a +4. If you fantasize about quitting a lot, that's a -8. If you feel like you rarely get to use your actual strengths at work, then that's also a -8. If you think you actually enjoy the idea of your job itself or like your role itself rather than what you're actually doing day to day, if that applies to you, that's a -6. If you really think about it, you realize that like you can't actually point to anything tangible or like concrete in your workday or like something that you do that actually feels stimulating or like enjoyable to you. If that applies to you, that's a -7. If you feel like the bad days at work significantly outweigh any good ones, then that's a -8. If you feel like the feedback on your work is clear and you know exactly what to fix and how to improve it, and you feel confident being able to improve your work, then that's a +6. If you feel safe asking questions to your superior or to like other people at work, that's a +5. If at work you regularly have to do tasks rushed, even though they could have been handled earlier, but they weren't handled earlier because of like poor planning on the part of your superior or your team or like your manager, if that applies to you, that's a -6. If people escalate tiny things as if they're emergencies, but they're not emergencies, then that's a -5. If you feel like you can disagree with your superior without being punished or seen in a bad way, that's a +7. If communication at your workplace is actually respectful and it happens in a timely manner and it's not vague comments or like, if it's not like if it's like actually a nice communicative workplace, then that's a +4. If you've cried over something that happened at work, either at work or like you've gone home and like cried about it, and that's a -8. If you feel like you're regularly being left out of meaningful work or meaningful projects at work, then that's a -6. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up at all at work, then that's a -8. If you feel like your role or your work doesn't actually matter or it's not actually like very useful work at all, then that's a -5. If in general you don't feel incompetent or like confused or like behind everyone at work, so like in general you feel quite confident in what you're doing and you know how to do it, and that's a +6. If you feel like you can work without constantly worrying about what other people in your team think how you're performing, or like if you don't really need external validation all the time and you just feel like you're doing fine, that's a +4. If you feel anxious on Sunday night or like you feel dread about having to go to work the next day, then that's a -7. If you're proud of the work you produce, then that's a +6. If this job affects your self-esteem at all, then that's a -8. If after you clock off or like after you sign off for the day, you feel like you can actually like mentally leave work, like you're not thinking about work when you're not working all the time, that's a +5. If you feel replaceable in your job, that's a -6. If because of your job you feel like you've become a more negative or like cynical person, or like you've mentally checked out a lot of days, and that's a -7. If you don't feel like your company or your workplace is gonna like explode, fall apart if you take time off because you trust the other people in the company or like the group to like take care of itself, you think you trust the system will work, then that's a +5. If you've completely lost sense of why you're doing this job, then that's a -8. If someone asks why you're still at this job and you realize you wouldn't actually have a real answer for them, then that's a -6. By the way, you can get an interactive version of this checklist. You can click the checkboxes and it'll tally up your score for you so you don't have to do it manually. If you want that, the link is up there and it's also in the description. If your gut is telling you that something is off or that like ultimately this is not right, then that's a -9. If the work hours and the work schedule at this job make sense for the life that you want, so like the subjective life that you want, and if you feel like you have a good work-life balance, then that's a +7. If you feel like your commute to work is too long, then that's a -2. If you're able to maintain friendships and hobbies outside of work, then that's a +6. If this job invades your evenings or your weekends, or you have to do a lot of overtime, then that's a -8. If you're not sacrificing health or sleep in any way at this job, and that's a +6. If you can picture yourself doing a version of this job in a few years down the line and you feel like you would still be quite happy or you'd still want to be in this job, and that's a +8. If you feel like you're performing a character or a role at work instead of being yourself, and that's a -10. If you feel like your pay actually feels fair or reflective for the amount of work and the value of the work that you do, then it's a +8. If you feel like you're learning skills at work that you'll actually use later, either in life or at a future job, that's a +6. If promotions at your workplace are based on merit and not based on favoritism or workplace politics, then it's a +5. If you feel like you're being underpaid, that's a -10. And if you feel like you're being underpaid, when you bring up the fact that you feel like you're being underpaid, if you're made to feel by the workplace or like your superior that you're being unreasonable, or the conversation is spun in a way to make you feel guilty, that's also a -10. If you know the tangible steps you need to take in order to get promoted at this job or like get to the next step in your career where you want to get to, that's a +4. If you feel like you're only staying at this job or you're mostly staying at this job because you're scared of the alternative, then that's a -7. If you feel like the trade-off of your time or your stress or your energy doesn't feel worth it for the amount of pay or the other benefits that you get at this job, then that's a -9. If you feel like you chose this job or you accepted this job because it's what you should want and not what you actually want or what you actually need, then that's a -7. If you feel like your work is repetitive and it doesn't seem to change, or it's uninteresting to you and you feel like you just do the same repetitive shit every day, that's a -8. If you left this job tomorrow and you thought about it, you would struggle to explain to another person what you actually learned or what you actually took away from this job. If that applies to you, then that's a -7. Okay, so because this video is about whether or not your job is actually right for you, this is a good time to mention Squarespace, who is sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building a professional website, which is, in the modern day, is basically your CV, your portfolio, and like just general proof that you exist online now for employers, since you basically need an online presence now, either on a website or on LinkedIn. You need it, like people need to know that you're alive, basically. If you're applying for new roles, freelancing, or even just slowly planning your leave from your current job, having your own site can make you seem way more legitimate and promising to future employers than just like a PDF resume. You can show your projects, you can write case studies, you can link examples. Just, it's more customizable and you can actually explain more about yourself and your motivation behind your work. The really good part about Squarespace is that you basically don't need to know how to design or code anything. You just start with a template, you can drag things around, change the fonts and colors, and it already looks clean and professional. If you want to go even further, then Squarespace also has tools for selling digital products or setting up member-only areas. So if you ever want to turn your skills into something paid in that area, maybe become self-employed, you can do that right on your site. So if this video has actually made you start questioning your job a little bit or a lot, I'm fucking sorry, or thank me, or you're welcome. I don't fucking know. Do not blame me. At least get your next move set up properly, which you could do so by heading to squarespace.com/crystal for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/crystal to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. If you feel like in this job you're very slowly being pushed into like support or like adjacent tasks instead of your main role or what you were hired to do, or like main skill building, if that applies to you, that's a -6. If you like telling people what you do, then it's a +4. If this job you feel like aligns with your identity or like aligns with your values, then that's a +6. If you would do a version of this job even if you weren't getting paid, then that's a +8. If you wouldn't recommend this job to a friend, that's a -8. If you would take a class or a book related to your job out of genuine interest, so like voluntarily and because you're actually interested in the job itself, that's a +5. If the workplace culture or like the workplace doesn't really fit your values and that's affecting you, then that's a -9. If you feel like the job description or like what you were told the role would be when you started this job doesn't actually match the day-to-day of what you're doing, then that's a -7. If you like who you are when you work at this workplace or like in this job, then that's a +8. If you feel like your job's made you a worse version of yourself, then that's a -10. If you feel like you're becoming a more competent and confident person because of your job, that's a +6. If you realize you're spending more money outside of your job to like cope with your job, so for example, buying a lot of clothes, getting a lot of takeout, going out, drinking a lot, if that applies to you, then that's a -6. If you feel like your health routines keep getting pushed to the next week or like to the wayside, then that's a -7. If you sleep worse because of your job, either because you're not getting enough sleep or because you're lying in bed awake thinking about work, then that's a -8. If you had to reapply for this job today and you realize that you would not do it, then that's a -9. If you're constantly anticipating someone criticizing you at your workplace, then that's a -7. If you feel guilty when you're not working, then that's a -8. If you feel like you can clearly see that your work is doing something tangible and valuable to society and you feel connected to something real, then that's a +6. If some part of you feels proud of the work you do or the outcome of the work you do, then that's a +5. If you feel like you can make mistakes at your job and not flip out or like feel panic, then it's a +6. If this video is making you reconsider your job and whether it's right for you, then you should check out this other video I did breaking down how to pick a career based on your values. I also made an ebook of that video which goes into like even more detail than the video, which you can check out in the link up there or also in the description. If you like the benefits of your job or like the perks of your job, but you also at the same time feel like those benefits and perks are keeping you from leaving, then that's a -7. And finally, if you've been collecting reasons to justify staying and in your gut you know that you're just tallying reasons for you to stay and not quit, then that's a -8. So tally up your score. You should have a score between 177 and -320, or you should be somewhere in that range. And now I'm going to tell you what your score means. Okay, so if you scored between 140 and 177, then this job is genuinely a really good fit for you. You're probably in a job that really suits you. You're doing work that you clearly enjoy. It helps you grow as a person, and generally it fits your work-life balance. You like your job, basically. Good for you, man. Good for you. It might not be the perfect job because no job is perfect, but it's clearly worth you staying in this job. If you scored between 90 to 139, then this is a healthy job. It's a good fit. Most of the things at this job, like most important things, are working. There might be some friction, but there's like nothing major or like no giant red flags where you're like actually considering leaving. This is probably a job that's worth investing in and worth investing your future in or trying to work out. It's a pretty good gig, all things considered. But if you're able to just communicate maybe with the right people at work or adjust a couple things, tweak it here and there, then it'll probably be even better. Okay, if you score between 40 to 89, then this job is decent, but it's not the ideal job. So the job works, but it's not really your dream role. So here you could stay in this job, but you could also, if you wanted to, stay curious about other options out there. This is possibly a stepping stone role for you, and that's perfectly okay. If you scored between 0 to 39, then I would say that this is probably a transitional job. So this job is probably fine for the short term, and it might be helpful in the short term, but ultimately you in this role right now is probably not taking you anywhere. You're tolerating this job, it's not hurting you, but it's probably not really building you or your skills either. You can definitely stay for now, but don't conflate being comfortable with this being your forever job. It might be a good idea to start quietly exploring other options and just like lightly browsing the job market, building skills, updating your portfolio and your CV. Okay, if you score between -1 to -79, then this job is probably draining you and it's probably starting to cost you. So that cost could come from your time, your health, your happiness, your general well-being, your finances even. And you can keep going for a while, but it's likely not going to be very sustainable like this. So I would recommend seeing if there's anything you could realistically change about your role itself right now. But if that's not possible, then you should also be honest about what you need and what this job could realistically provide you right now. And I would also consider whether or not this job is necessarily worth it anymore. Okay, if you scored between -80 to -179, then this job is misaligned with you and it's clear the job isn't a good fit for you anymore. It's clearly starting to affect your mood, your routine, your health. It might even be affecting how you see yourself if you don't have the same values as your workplace. You don't need to like urgently quit tomorrow, but you should start making a plan to leave and find something else. Start actually looking for jobs, updating your CV, build a plan out. Okay, if you scored between -180 to -259, then this job is actively harmful and working against your life. At this point, it's time to take leaving actually seriously. Like, this is the point where leaving needs to be like an actual plan, not just something you say, like not a hypothetical, you know? So start updating your CV, your portfolio, talk to people, and start looking actively for alternatives. Okay, and finally, if you scored between -260 to -320, then this job is completely unsustainable and it's doing real damage to you in some aspect of your life, probably multiple aspects of your life, your health, your sense of self, values, time. And the trade-off is there's no way to kind of explain that you're providing a good trade-off anymore. Staying here long-term clearly comes at a cost to you that you clearly don't want to pay, and you should start urgently planning leaving, because if you stay here, it's very likely that something else important in your life is going to give and it's going to make way for the situation. So it could be your own health, your relationships, your sense of self, your confidence, your time. Don't wait for an actual crisis or like a meltdown moment to make the decision for you. You should make the decision now, and I think you know what you need. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, then you should check out some of these other career videos I made, but I also make videos on other topics, so just click something. Thank you.